Okay, so this is the project. Primroses in Sugar in a plastic pot. Okay, so with the primroses, what we're going to do is use the 5 6-sided star tool. And we're going to use the 5-sided one, which is the bit where you've got the straight edge and then it kind of tapers straight rather than fully pointed. Okay, and it's got 5 little ridges in there, which we can use as a guide. And the paste that I'm going to use, I've got just pale yellow. Okay, it's the Squire's Kitchen flour paste. We're just covering that pale yellow. Out. You won't need much. The quantity I've given you will do more than 5 flowers. So I'm just using the melon yellow spectral paste colour for this. I have already pre-coloured the green, but I haven't pre-coloured the yellow. Only ever paint or just colour your paste the shade you need for the palest part of the flower. So if your flower is really pale, like the primrose, then only pale yellow will be the right colour. You can't really lighten the paste. If you find that whatever you're trying to create is white with other colours, you're going to have to start in white if you want it to look authentic. It's really, really difficult to make the colours lighter, coloured paste lighter, unless you're painting on with alcohol and petal dust, and then that doesn't look as realistic. It kind of shows. So this probably still looks white. All right. We'll just take a little bit off there, about 1 centimetre. The rest can go under cover. We just need a small ball to start with. And just make sure that you've got something with a lid, or pop it in a bag, just so it doesn't dry out. I'm going to take that piece of paste and warm it up nicely. I am noticing that we are going a bit blurred on here, so if you notice my face, that's me just resetting. Okay, so into a nice smooth crack-free ball, and then I'm just going to roll out. If you just put your finger on one side to get a point, that will be helpful because you're going to be able to handle it. Now, if you've done pulled flowers before, you might want to work alongside me for this, but I do think it might be better to actually, if you haven't done many of these, to watch this process first so that you can go see all the stages. Otherwise, yours might dry out before I'm finished. So I've got the 5-sided part of the star tool. Put a bit of corn flour on there, and then find the center of your fat part of your cone with the tip of the tool, and then just push that in. I'm pushing in to just under halfway, and then having corn floured it up, it should allow you to remove the tool, so it reveals this kind of 6 lines or 5 lines. Okay, we will need to use the scissors to cut through these lines now to about halfway down the cone. So there'll be 5 snips, and we can open that up like so. And then I can round off the edges because where you cut is quite square. And then I'm going to snip in some shorter cuts which are right in the middle of each of those petals. Okay, so in between each one, so you've got this kind of shape now. Then you can use a tweezers or your fingers, whatever you find easier, a cocktail stick, and we just want to press in on that side in the center where we've cut the snip, just to round those areas off, because again, because we've cut, they've actually squared themselves off. Okay, so just use anything you have that you think will work. You can use your fingers as well if they'll allow. A bit of corn flour on your finger and thumb, and I'm just going to put my thumb underneath one of the petals and my finger on the top and press firmly. And this is flattening the whole petal. Okay, so now you've got something that looks a little bit like that. I am going to change, let's just change the glare of the light because it's struggling to focus. Okay, so now we've got that, we can go ahead and thin each petal. Now I'm going to use, to start with, I'm going to use a silk veining tool. Sometimes you get these in ceramic. These are plastic, which is less breakable, and they come on the back end with a smile tool. And the first thing I need to make sure is that I've got enough corn flour on my finger. Now I'm left-handed. If you're right-handed, you're going to want to put corn flour on your left finger, pointing finger, probably where that crease, the first crease is, and where your knuckle is. Okay, but I'm going to use this side. Position and press down one petal onto that part of your knuckle. A bit of corn flour on the tool. And as you're holding the tool, you're going to point the point of the tool up towards the corner of the ceiling, maybe behind you. And then we're just going to press on the outside edge. So start in the center where you've got your shortest snip. Roll the tool one side and then roll the tool the other side. So what happens is the petal flattens and turns into a heart shape. Okay. And you may need to add corn flour onto your finger depending on how sticky it is. If you find it sticks, just be really careful how you peel it off, otherwise your petal might come off. So we're working all the way around. Now you can get cutters for primroses, and they're absolutely fine. There's no trouble with that. But the reason I wanted to get involved with using this tool is because it means you can make so many different flowers. So you've got bluebells and blossom, forget-me-nots, all the buttercup, all the ones I showed you, periwinkle, and I'm just going to widen this one a little bit more. Violas, wild pansies, bigger pansies, all without a cutter. So now I've got the 5 petals looking like little hearts all the way around. And I want to just do a final press in the center, which you can use a cocktail stick for, or you can go in with the end of your tip of the tool that you've just worked with, or you can also use the star tool. I'm going to go into the center to reinforce that hole. So you end up with a nice little indent in the middle there. Okay, so there's one last thing, which is actually getting this onto the wire. So I'll show you that, and then it's time for you to have a go. So we'll just take a 26 gauge wire or a 24. Either or, it doesn't matter. Something that's just going to hold upright. 28 will be too thin. Go right to the end with your angled tweezers and turn over a hook so it's tight. Then we want to paint some glue onto the hooked end. We don't need too much glue, just enough to wet it. We don't want to melt the paste. Pick up your little flower, feed the unhooked end through the front, right through the middle of the stem, and then pull the hook so it embeds itself into the flower. So it's just in. Okay, it's just in, you can just see it. And then at the back, we're going to neaten this off just by pressing. I've got my 2 pointing fingers, thumb on top. So it's kind of making a bit of a trio. And if you want to, you can use just your 2 pointing fingers to make it a little bit thinner. So it just draws it down the wire a little bit. Now we'll put the calyx on and the stamen in later, but that is your blossom, or primrose, should we say. If you're wondering what size this is, it's coming out probably a diameter on the flower of about 2 centimeters. And in terms of length, it's about, I know you can't see this because it's blurred, it's about 2.5. Okay, so is anyone working with the cutter tonight? If you are, I could just talk you through, but if not, Okay, so once you made your flowers, we need to put the little stamen into the center. It's in quite deep. It doesn't sit proud. It's popped right in there. But it does make it look like a primrose. So you can either use the seed head stamens or the ones with just a ball on the end. And if you're using these, you only need about 1 centimetre of the stem. So just probably about here. You only need 1 per flower. So 1 stamen, because there's double heads, will do you 2. And all we do on here, we don't need to colour them because we'll colour once we've completed the flower. We just take the stamen with the tweezers just quite high up where the end is. And we don't need any glue. You can just simply pop that as deeply as possible into there. So it's not recessed, but it is only just the head sticking out. Okay, when you push this in, just take care that it doesn't poke out of the back here where the paste is. So that's how you use the shop bought one, but at the moment they're really expensive and quite difficult to come by. So you can actually make your stamens by hand using Tylose powder, CMC, and some water. So I've got water in a mug here. Just a little bit of CMC. I've got loads of water. You really don't need that much. And if we use 33 gauge wires, they're very fine. Just need 1/3 cut wire. And we don't have to cut it to start with. All I'm going to do is just dip the very tip end of this into the water and then into my CMC Tylose powder, gum tragacanth if you've got it. And if you go again with the water, so some of you have made these already, but others won't have come across this, and dip again, and you can see it's starting to create a little blob on the end there. If you want it bigger, then you can just keep dipping it in the water, dipping it into the CMC. Sometimes it helps if you just twiddle the wire as you come out, just to take the loose excess off, okay, until you've got yourself a little blob on the end here. So I've just gone a couple of times, probably is enough. Then I'm going to just leave that for a few moments to absorb, and it becomes like jelly. And then you can cut as I've shown you with the shop bought stamens. Again, we don't need to colour this until we come to colour the whole flower. The stamens themselves, once they're dry, they shouldn't come off the end unless you pull. They stay a bit loose, so you probably need to wait 2 or 3 minutes before you use this one. Okay, but all you would do is just cut 1 centimetre, and then of course that means I can make more with this length of wire because we only need a short length. Let's just move my cup out of the way, and we can insert the handmade stamen. I show you that one versus one that's shop bought. There's not a huge amount of difference between them. And this can just be carefully pushed in. If it's not dry, be careful, because when you handle the top, it might crumble off. You can see it in there. I'll show you the calyx on the back there. It's really odd. And when you look, until you look at the real flower, you think, really? But it does look like a primrose once you add that. So the best way I've found to make this is to have your spring green, so pale green. We're going to break off about 1/2 centimetre ball of paste. So it really isn't a lot. We're looking at our ruler. It really isn't going to be a lot. It's about 1/2 centimetre. Okay. And then if we roll that into a nice, smooth, crack-free ball, into a bit of a sausage shape. You could do cone or sausage. It does have a bit of a rounded bottom though, so maybe a sausage or a tic-tac shape would be better. And then just using corn flour and a little bit, well, my cocktail stick's just broken. Okay, a cocktail stick or the tool that you were using to thin the edges of the petal. So just pop that with a bit of corn flour. We're just going to pop that into the tic-tac and start to hollow out the shape. Okay, it's quite small. And this piece then, as it is, will be fed onto the wire. So if you make the end of the wire go through the hollowed out part, bring it up to the flour, and then pop some glue onto just the bottom part of your flour and push that up, but don't make it come all the way up, because on the primroses you can see yellow stem. So this almost elongates the flower. And then to get your texture, you're going to use your tweezers. So have them sitting so the pointed part of the tweezers is up towards the back of the flower. And you're just going to take hold and pinch. Each time, one side of the tweezers can be rested on the groove side that you've just made. And the idea is to make maybe 5 grooves. Okay, so I'm going to show that again. So 1/2 centimetre ball of paste. Keep the rest under cover so it doesn't dry out. Roll it into a tic-tac shape. Use your cocktail stick. If you push in, it is easier with the cocktail stick. Push in and start to hollow out. So you're just kind of pressing the piece against your finger to hollow. My cocktail stick has gone into about here, so it's quite deep. And once you've got your hollowed out piece, feed the back end of the wire through. Start to bring it up to the flower. Take your glue brush, a little bit of glue at the base of the flower. Feed that up and press it on. So it's only securing in this area where it is at the base of the flower. And then with your tweezers, clamp and press. So I'm kind of pressing down onto the flower, but I'm also closing the tweezers sideways. And you should be able to get 5 presses in there. So the primrose leaves, I mean, in real life, they come in all different sizes. Some are more wavy than others. Some are more just a little bit shaped like this. You've got others as they, you know, the smaller ones be more curled back. They actually grow curled backwards. So when they first start to sprout, they look like little curled cigarillos or cigarette shape. and then they start to unfurl, but they're still a little bit curled on the edges. So this is the large one. I've actually done that by hand, so I'm going to show you one by hand, but also show you one that's using an oak leaf cutter. This one's got quite a lot of scallops on it, and I've got another variety here. Let's just find it here. This is an Orchard Products one. This is an FMM, which has got, still going to trim some of this because it's quite shapes. And the veiner I'm going to use is actually a foxglove veiner, but the Primrose works, but the foxglove is a very, very, very similar texture. So if at any point you want to do the foxglove, then you can use those, or your primrose for the foxglove. I'm just going to take a little bit of paste. This is going to be kind of spring green shade, slightly darker than the green you had for the backs of the primrose. I'll just mix that with my yellow just to brighten it up a little bit. Get rid of the marbling, just get that all mixed together. And then if you have got a groove board, if you use the largest one, the one that's got the most deep groove, it's just going to make your life a lot easier. But only work with just over a centimetre ball of paste. So this is about 1.5 centimetres ball of paste. Okay, and then that way you haven't got lots of rolling out to do for just a small cutter shape. So first things first, a little bit of corn flour so it doesn't stick on the board. And if you want, this can be a party sausage shape. Pop it on quite low down to the bottom because you'll get a nice deep groove, and roll sideways a little bit to help you get the width before you start to draw the rolling pin lengthways. So that can now, I've put more corn flour because it's sticking to my rolling pin already. And then roll nice and thin. Peel that off, turn it over, and then we can take whichever cutter you've got and line up where the stem's going to go, which is the bottom here, this more pointed end, with the fattest end on the ridge, and centralize the rest of the cutter. You get a good rub. Pull the excess from around, and then just run your finger on there to get a nice crisp cut. Drop your shape out. This excess can go under cover. Now on here, the shaping of the side of the leaf is quite dramatic, so we can take just a little bit off that if we want, just a couple of snips to get rid of the ones that are sticking out quite a bit. It's just to calm it down a little bit and make it more this shape. Use a 28 gauge wire. I've cut these into thirds, and insert your wire. So just make sure the wire is nice and straight. Position it centrally into the vein, and then apply a bit of pinching pressure top and bottom to force that to stay in the thick ridge. If it puckers a little bit, if it kind of ruches up, then just stretch the leaf a little bit so it runs down the wire, and that should then not show either side. Okay, so at this point we can vein. A little bit of corn flour again so it doesn't stick. The indented part, so this one's got like a recess in there. This is going to make the back, and the ridge, we don't really want to see the ridge, so we're going to have that on the back as well. So ridge face down on the recessed part. I'm going to come down the bottom here because it gives me quite a strong texture. And then we're going to press on the vein. and release to reveal a really lovely, I actually really like this texture. It kind of reminds me a little bit of lettuce or cabbage. I really like it. So a couple of bits to shape. I want to run my finger and thumb down either side of the ridge to kind of fold this in a little bit in the center. I'm going to have a little bit of a curve this way, so thumb in the center of the wire, finger just curving it back a little bit. And on the, because this is one of the younger leaves, I'm also going to curve this part here back a little bit as well, so that it looks like it's just unfurling from the back. So if I turn this round now, you can see I've got a curl towards the back. And that we can just leave up right on a piece of Oasis to dry. I will also, as some of you might not have the cutter, I'm just going to show you how you make one by hand without using the cutter. The texture, I mean, you could always pick 2 primrose leaves from the garden if you've got them, and you could use those if you wash and dry them, and then you can use those as your texture if you can't get hold of the veiner or don't want to buy the veiner. So just press that on. Make sure that that stays within the ridge. My rolling pin is super sticky. I had trouble this morning as well. It keeps peeling off. So just a little bit of corn flour. I don't like to use a lot of corn flour, but at the moment this is not behaving without it. Nice and thin. Peel that off and turn it over. So now you've got something that you can trim, and I would say probably cutting wheel is the best thing. And when you're cutting with a cutting wheel, rather than cutting dead upright, just tilt the cutting wheel towards the outside edge of the leaf shape that you're cutting, and that way you're going to cut under the paste a little bit, which is much better. I can cut this across here to neaten it first, and then I'm going to allow a little bit of stem, so I'm going to come up one side of the ridge and then turn just the blades kind of drawing out to make it fat in the center to the top. We're going to round off the top, and then I could do the same on the other side to match. You might find it easier to turn it so it looks like a semi-deflated or a semi-inflated balloon. Just try and match what you've got on the other side, but don't worry too much because we're actually going to give it some slight indents in a moment. So if you can't get this bit exact, it doesn't matter. Okay, so we've got a bit of a weird shape going on. And then with my cutting wheel, I'm just going to come in and cut a curve and then a second curve so that it looks a bit wavy. And we can do the same on the other side. So this is if you have not got a cutter, or if you haven't got a cutter that's as large. You can always, again, refer to a real primrose leaf for the shaping. And they do differ. And now we're ready to cut our 28 gauge wire that's been cut into 3. So just make sure that the wire that you're using is straight and hasn't got a kinked end. Okay, so we'll push that in as far as we can. And then I'm going to take my little veiners, come down a bit far, corn flour to stop it sticking. Press firm, but don't wiggle because you don't want the wire to change shape. Release. And now you can see you've got a handmade one. So again, you can do the curve first if that's easier. So just the bigger ones will have a little bit more of a curve. They'll be a little bit closed up, but only have a little bit of turn down around the edge. Looks like a posh lettuce leaf. Okay, so that's how you make the big ones. And again, they're just left upright to dry. The colouring for the primrose is quite simple. And there's very little on the wild primrose, especially. You've got your pale yellow colour, which stays the same. We're only going to mark the centre. And on the leaves, they are quite monotone. Got a little bit of green going on the back of the primrose flower as well. So we'll start off by showing you how to get the markings on the primrose. And of course, there are different varieties. So you can take a look at what you like and copy maybe a real flower or something off the internet. But I'm mixing my gin or vodka, anything clear, with a little bit of lemon yellow petal dust. And then if you twist the brush in the paint, you'll find you should get a nice point on your brush. And then the idea here, see if we could get this painted on. So first of all, I'm going to catch the center, the stamen bit, yellow. With painting with alcohol and petal dust, you want to do it in one hit. You don't want to go back over the same place again until the paint that's on the flower is dry, because it can lift. So I'm just loading the brush again. And this time, all I'm going to do is lay the brush just down. And this is in the center of each petal, going into the middle of the flower. So you'll end up with something that looks a little bit like a star. You might have to reload the paintbrush. Now, if I can get that, can you see? It's got like a star. So I've just lined up the brush and press down, rather than try and draw a line, which is quite tricky to do. Just literally lay the brush and press down, and try not to overpaint until that's dry. That's all you need to do with the painting. With the calyx, I'm just going to mix in here. I've got a little bit of lemon yellow, a little bit of moss green, and we can pick some of that up onto a clean piece of tissue just to work it into your brush a little bit more. And brushing upwards, get that onto your calyx. Now, it's not going to make a huge difference, but it will make a difference. Doesn't matter if some of that green comes up onto the stem of the flower. It's actually quite pretty. So that's your flower, quite easy. I'll show you a leaf as well, and then that way you've got the full picture and we can crack on and do. So with the leaf, you maybe want to introduce just a little bit more green. So it's still limey, but it's a little bit darker. So we can draw up the center of the leaf. You'll notice here I'm supporting the back, and then simply cover with the color all over. So your cornflower will come off, it'll be brushed off, and you'll be left with this just kind of spring green shade. They really haven't got much tone. At the very most, they might have a little bit of darker green from the base through the center, but mostly they just, the color is the same all over. So you're going to end up with a slight difference probably mostly that there's no corn flour on it. Do some on the back as well, okay, just to make that look nice. I've got my little pot, and the idea is to, bless you, that's on camera. The idea is to put some just sugar paste. It doesn't have to be flour paste, so we'll pop that in. I've just made it roughly the shape. You might need a couple of goes to work out how much you need. You could put a blob in there, and then if you need more, put a disc in rather than try and pull it back out. So we need to leave a little bit at the top, okay, just as if it was soil. And then to texture that, I'm going to use my angled tweezers. So we're just digging in and closing up. And just don't dig too far. You can, as you pull up, you could put a little bit of paste so there's some loose paste in places. But the idea is just to give it texture. So if you do start to pull up shreds of it, then when you dust this, they will dampen down anyway. And once you have dusted, if you need to, you can retexture. So just work your way all the way around. And then once I've done this, I will dust it. Well, I'm not going to do this one, but what I did do was dusted it with a mix of black, some green, some red, some brown, or green and red will give you brown anyway, just to get the colour of soil. Or if you wanted to, you could actually make little pebbles. You know how sometimes you get gravel in a pot, so you could make little pebbles out of sugar paste. You don't need to make them out of flour paste. And then you could colour those different shades of grey and brown, a bit of green maybe, and make it look like shingle, pea shingle, grit. Okay, so this, then I would take my colour and with the brush facing down, dab the colour on. So of course I haven't got the colour on here, but it's just to show you, give you the idea. All over until you've got the shade you want. Now here, because when I press down on here, it flattened some of the texture, I then went back round and used the tweezers just to repinch. This is before you put the flowers in. And if you look closely, you can see there's different shades, mostly brown, but you've got bits of blue that's been pulled through. And that's the colour of the paste. And I thought, oh, well, it looks all right. So I've left it like that. If you've got white, then it'll be white that comes through. So once you've coloured up your soil, then you're ready to start to assemble. And my suggestion would be to start with the leaves. So I've probably got more than I need here, but I'm going to start off with one of the big ones. And everything I insert is going to be within probably a 10p piece worth in the centre. So I'm not going to poke the leaves around the outside. I'm going to imagine that this primrose is growing just in that centre bit there. You can see here it's all concentrated towards the middle, leaves and flowers. Now I've already trimmed these ones, but you don't have to make them this short. They could be as long as this pot if you want, especially if you think you might use them for something else. But I have bent it back on itself a little bit, so you've got an angle to the leaf, and that means that it's easier to put them into the flower pot. So we can just pop them in however you would like. There's actually no rhyme or reason how these, no pattern on how these go in. So you can have big ones nearer the center and small ones coming out underneath, however you want. And the more unbalanced and odd numbered it looks, the better. So these can be a little bit longer. You don't need to trim. Only trim the ones that you're going to put in the pot. If your plan is to put your leaves into another arrangement, like a garland, for example, then you don't want to be trimming the stems at this stage because you might need the length. And when you position the wire, then use your tweezers. I normally have them upside down so that when I push in, I can just help. It's just easier to go in. I'm holding them at a bit of an angle at the moment. They look better if they're not sitting flat. And you'll notice as well that I'm leaving a bit of a gap in the center to help me in a moment with the flowers. So just clamp right at the top here. Push back on yourself. That gives you a nice angle. Turn the tweezers the other way, lower and position. This one I'm going to pop right in the middle as if it's growing up inside where the primrose might be. Okay. So now we've got our petals to go in. So we know that we can have some height to this, but also we can go down as far as the bottom of the flower pot. So if you're not sure to start with, don't trim them too short. Keeping the stems nice and straight, helping yourself by lowering. I'm just going to change the angle so you can see what I'm doing here with one hand. Okay, so I'm using the tweezers, but I'm down the bottom here because if you push from the top, it could bend the stem. Just make sure you're closing the tweezers up to be able to do this. Get that into where you want. So you can have tall ones and short ones. I've got some that are already pre-cut here, so we can pop those in. You can do that. You can just push them in by hand if you want to, but if you're worried they might bend, then. So this is a little bit like flower arranging, really, isn't it? And again, there's no kind of pattern to follow. I do like, when I was doing the others, I quite liked the idea of having leaves in the middle as well, and some flowers behind. And you can just keep adding your flowers until you feel like you've got enough. I'm just going to pop this one in. And some pansies have got loads of leaves, others have got loads of flowers. Okay, and there you have your vase of primrose. Feeling like I want to put another one in there, just in there. Colour your earth before you put all your blooms in.